Welcome to History Zettel. If you are new here, this channel investigates the forgotten operations, unsolved mysteries, and buried evidence of the Second World War. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next case. On the morning of April 20th, 1945, Adolf Hitler celebrated his 56th and final birthday in the Führer bunker beneath Berlin's Reich Chancellery. As Soviet artillery shells crashed into the city above, the aging dictator received a parade of well-wishers, knowing that the Third Reich's collapse was now inevitable. That same morning, Hitler authorized an operation that would become one of the war's most intriguing mysteries. Its code name was Operation Seraglio, and it would result in the permanent disappearance of documents Hitler himself called essential to understanding his actions. Operation Seraglio was conceived in desperation. By mid-April 1945, Berlin was surrounded by Soviet forces advancing from the east. The city's airports were under constant artillery fire, and most had already been captured or rendered unusable. Hitler's personal pilot, SS General Hans Bauer, had maintained a small fleet of aircraft at various airfields around the capital. Bauer was no ordinary pilot. He had flown Hitler since 1932, navigating the Führer through countless campaign flights and military journeys. Now, with Berlin's defenses crumbling, Bauer was tasked with organizing what would be one of the last major evacuations from the doomed capital. The operation called for approximately 10 Junkers transport aircraft to fly personnel and materials from Berlin to safer locations in southern Germany. The passengers would include Hitler's personal secretaries, staff members, and various Nazi officials deemed too valuable to abandon to Soviet capture. But the cargo was even more significant. Martin Bormann, Hitler's powerful personal secretary, had assembled a collection of documents, files, and personal effects that Hitler wanted preserved. According to post-war testimonies, these materials included correspondence, policy documents, and records that Hitler believed would vindicate his decisions before history. The aircraft departed from Gatow Airfield, west of Berlin, which remained operational despite being under intermittent Soviet artillery fire. Among those evacuated were Christa Schroeder and Johanna Wolf, two of Hitler's long-serving personal secretaries. Albert Bormann, the younger brother of Martin Bormann and chief of Hitler's private chancellery, also departed on one of the flights. The evacuation took place over several days, from April 20th through April 23rd. Each flight was a gamble. Soviet fighters controlled much of the airspace, and Allied bombers operated freely over Germany. The transport aircraft, slow and vulnerable, made easy targets. Most of the Operation Seraglio flights reached their destinations successfully. Aircraft landed at various locations in Bavaria, including near Berchtesgaden and other sites in southern Germany. Personnel disembarked, cargo was unloaded, and participants scattered to await Germany's inevitable surrender. But one aircraft never completed its journey. On April 21st, 1945, a Junkers Ju-352 transport aircraft encountered catastrophe near the village of Bernersdorf, close to the Czech border. The Junkers Ju-352 was a newer design than the more common Ju-52. It featured a larger cargo capacity and improved performance, though it shared the distinctive corrugated metal skin that characterized Junkers aircraft. The specific aircraft involved in the Bernersdorf crash was carrying a particularly sensitive cargo. According to Hans Bauer's later testimony, the aircraft held 10 heavy metal boxes containing Hitler's personal documents. These zinc-lined containers were designed to protect their contents from fire and water damage. Weather conditions on April 21st were poor. Heavy clouds blanketed the region, and visibility was severely limited. The Ju-352 was flying at low altitude, attempting to navigate through mountainous terrain while avoiding detection. Witnesses on the ground later reported hearing the distinctive sound of a Junkers transport struggling overhead, the engine sputtering and coughing in the thick air. What happened next remains somewhat unclear, but the result was catastrophic. The aircraft struck high ground near Bernersdorf with tremendous force. The impact killed everyone aboard instantly. The exact number of people aboard has never been definitively established, with estimates ranging from 4 to 8 individuals. The aircraft broke apart on impact, scattering wreckage across a wide area. Among the dead was the pilot, whose identity was later confirmed through death records discovered in the Bernersdorf Municipal Archives. Local villagers heard the crash and approached the site cautiously. What they found must have been both horrifying and fascinating. Among the twisted metal and personal effects of the dead, they discovered the intact metal document boxes. Several witnesses later testified to seeing these containers, describing them as heavy zinc or steel boxes with reinforced corners and sturdy locks. The boxes had survived the impact largely intact, their contents presumably protected by their robust construction. This is where the story becomes considerably more mysterious. According to some accounts, villagers opened the boxes and examined their contents before German military personnel arrived at the crash site. What they saw inside has been described variously as documents, photographs, and papers bearing official Nazi seals and Hitler's personal letterhead. Other witnesses claimed the boxes were secured by SS troops who arrived within hours of the crash, removed the containers, and transported them away under heavy guard. The testimonies are contradictory, leaving historians with more questions than answers. Hans Bauer was informed of the crash while still in Berlin. Years later, in his memoirs published in 1956, Bauer made cryptic reference to the incident. He wrote that when he told Hitler about the crash, the Führer expressed more concern about the lost documents than about the dead crew members. Hitler reportedly stated that he had entrusted the aircraft with extremely valuable documents that would show posterity the truth of his actions. This response was consistent with Hitler's increasingly detached mental state in the war's final days. After Germany's surrender, various intelligence agencies became interested in the Bernersdorf crash. American and Soviet investigators both attempted to locate the document boxes. The crash site was in territory that would become part of Soviet-controlled East Germany, complicating Western efforts to investigate. Local residents were interviewed repeatedly over the years, but their testimonies were often contradictory. Some claimed the SS had recovered the boxes. Others insisted that villagers had hidden them, fearing retribution if discovered with such sensitive materials. A few suggested the boxes might have been buried near the crash site itself. The mystery took an unexpected turn in the 1980s when a German journalist named Gerd Heidemann became obsessed with the Bernersdorf crash. Heidemann spent years researching the incident, tracking down elderly villagers, and searching archives in both East and West Germany. His investigation led him to claim he had found Hitler's personal diaries, allegedly recovered from the crashed aircraft. The diaries were purchased by the German magazine Stern for millions of marks, and were announced to the world in 1983 as one of history's greatest discoveries. Almost immediately, experts began expressing doubts. British historian Hugh Trevor Roper, initially convinced of the diary's authenticity, reversed his opinion after closer examination. When subjected to forensic analysis, the diaries proved to be crude forgeries. The paper contained post-war materials, the ink was of modern manufacture, and the content was largely plagiarized from published sources. The forger, a small-time dealer named Konrad Kujau, had created the diaries over several years and sold them to Heidemann. Both men were eventually convicted and imprisoned for fraud. The Hitler diaries scandal obscured legitimate questions about the Bernersdorf crash. Because the diaries were fake, many researchers dismissed the entire story of the crashed document flight as fabrication, but this conclusion is not supported by the evidence. Operation Seraglio demonstrably occurred. Multiple aircraft did fly from Berlin to Bavaria in late April 1945. One aircraft did crash near Bernersdorf on April 21st. These facts are confirmed by death records, eyewitness accounts from multiple sources, and German military documentation. The real question is what happened to the document boxes after the crash? Several theories have emerged over the decades. The first theory holds that SS troops recovered the boxes immediately and transported them south, where they were either destroyed or hidden before Germany's surrender. This theory is supported by testimonies from some villagers who claimed armed SS personnel arrived at the crash site within hours and secured the area. A second theory suggests that villagers did hide the boxes, either burying them near the crash site or concealing them in cellars and barns. According to this scenario, the boxes might still exist, hidden somewhere in the countryside around Bernersdorf. Treasure hunters and amateur historians have searched the area repeatedly, but no confirmed discoveries have been reported. A third possibility is that Soviet forces recovered the boxes when they occupied the region in May 1945. Soviet troops systematically searched areas of Germany they occupied, seeking intelligence materials and valuable items. If Soviet soldiers found the boxes, they would have been transported to Moscow and placed in Soviet archives. With the opening of some former Soviet archives in the 1990s, researchers hoped to find references to the documents, but no definitive evidence has emerged. The most pessimistic theory holds that the documents were destroyed either deliberately by German forces to prevent their capture or accidentally through fire or water damage despite the protective boxes. This scenario is perhaps least satisfying but maybe most realistic. In the chaos of Germany's collapse, thousands of important documents were burned, buried, or simply lost. What might the documents have contained? Hitler's statement that they would show posterity the truth of his actions is intriguing but vague. Some historians speculate the boxes held correspondence with other world leaders, potentially including evidence of rejected peace overtures or diplomatic exchanges that might cast Hitler's decisions in a different light. Others suggest military documents, perhaps including operational orders or strategic assessments that Hitler wanted preserved. Another possibility is that the documents related to the Holocaust. By April 1945, the Nazi extermination program was well documented, with camps being liberated and evidence mounting. Hitler might have wanted to preserve documents he believed justified the genocide or that deflected responsibility to subordinates. Alternatively, the documents could have been purely personal items, letters from Eva Braun, family correspondence, or Hitler's own writings and sketches that he valued for sentimental reasons. The truth is, we simply do not know. Without the documents themselves, all speculation remains just that, speculation. The Bernersdorf crash site has been thoroughly searched multiple times over the past 80 years. The location is well documented, marked in local records and remembered by the community. Modern metal detectors and ground-penetrating radar have been used to scan the area. While fragments of aircraft wreckage have been recovered, no document boxes have been found. Several elderly residents of Bernersdorf, interviewed in the 1980s and 1990s, maintain consistent stories about seeing the boxes immediately after the crash. Their descriptions matched, noting the heavy construction, the zinc or steel material, and the roughly rectangular shape. These witnesses had no apparent motive to fabricate their accounts, and their testimonies were given decades before the Hitler Diaries scandal brought unwanted attention to the area. The fate of Operation Seraglio's lost documents remains one of World War II's genuine mysteries. Unlike many supposed Nazi secrets that turn out to be myths or exaggerations, this incident is firmly grounded in documented history. An aircraft did crash. Documents were aboard. People saw metal boxes at the crash site. What happened next is genuinely unknown. Were the boxes recovered by German forces, hidden by villagers, seized by Soviets, or destroyed? Each scenario has supporting evidence and plausible arguments. The story of Operation Seraglio and the lost Hitler documents reflects a larger truth about the war's end. In those chaotic final days, countless events occurred that were never fully documented, witnessed by people who are now gone, involving materials that disappeared into the fog of history. Some mysteries will be solved as new archives open and new evidence emerges. Others may remain forever unanswered, tantalizing questions that remind us how much of the past remains unknowable despite our best efforts to uncover it. Thank you for watching. If this investigation gave you something to think about, please comment, like, and share. Subscribe to History Zettel and join us for the next one. The file is never truly closed.